Okay. Okay, so welcome to the PSC Retirees Chapter meeting. As you can see, Anne is not here. She's unable to be with us today, and so I'm going to do the chairing, at least partly, because Joan has already agreed to do the AI portion, which is why you're all here. We have only one topic today, and that is AI in war and in education. We have two speakers with us today. So after Joan and the two speakers tell you about AI, then we will have Debbie Bell will be here to talk a little bit about the latest in healthcare. I don't think there's a huge amount of things occurring, but she will be here. Mike Foley was going to be here, but he has a benefits fair at BMCC, so he won't be here, but he assures me that he will answer any questions or concerns via email, or you can call him on the phone. He's really great about being responsive. He's great about answering all the questions you have. Don't hesitate to call Mike. He's always coming to our meetings. And then and at the end, Debbie will tell us a little bit about the healthcare issues. And then we'll also maybe get a pitch about the elections from Eileen, who I'm sure is here, and Nancy Roma. We'll talk a little bit about phone banking for those of us who want to do a last push for getting people out to vote. So let's start with Joan. I'll turn it over to Joan and she can start with AI. Joan
Thanks,
Greenbaum.
Diane. Welcome. The day before election, we're all have bated breath here in New York. And I'm very, very excited to introduce the speakers and the topic. Many of you will remember 2 years ago, we had speakers on AI, and they talked about really the political economy of those companies that are ruling the roost now. Today, we're going to be more specific. And we're going to be more specific because we need to be, so that we can all walk away and be able to ask good questions when we're being thrown a lot of, that stuff that's thrown in our face. To give you some historical examples, and I think you're going to remember this, because after all, we have age as our badges now. In the 60s and 70s, we were all told, oh, computers, they'll solve all of our problems unless they wipe out the world with nuclear war. Remember that? It was either or. And then in the 80s and 90s, we heard about mini computers and desktop computers, and they would be able to do all tasks if they didn't take away all jobs. So either or, either or. And then, of course, when the internet started, we were told, oh, this is the best thing since sliced bread for democracy. It will just make everybody be able to communicate with everybody. And this century, as you know, we have been and are continue to be told that social media will make us all so much in touch with each other and enhance the democratic process. Now, I'm being sarcastic here, but we're hearing the same things about AI. And that's why it's important to dig down to specific topics. The first part of the meeting, and I will introduce Lucy Suchman only for this, and the second part, we're going to have Britt Parrott on those things that deal with educational AI, particularly from the perspective of unions and faculty and staff. But right now, we're focusing on war. And the reason for that is, among other things, that the military has been a main funder. So any aspect of AI that we see is really coming from or originating with those assumptions that are behind the things that war has to bring us. Let me introduce Lucy Suchman, who is a longtime colleague of mine, I must admit. She is a distinguished and retired professor of anthropology of technology and science at the University of Cambridge, uh, in the Lancaster, I'm sorry, Lancaster, in the United Kingdom. She's the author of many, many articles and books. You may have seen her on television or in internet interviews. Um, and she has been doing research about technology and the military for a very, very long time. Lucy, take it away, please.
Okay, thank you, Joan. And I could say so many things about Joan, but I'll restrain myself for the moment. But just as you all know, Joan has been such an incredibly important figure in writing critically about automation and labor for the past, say, four decades at least. And we've all learned an enormous amount from her. So I'm really happy to be here. I'm talking to you from Salt Spring Island in British Columbia in Canada. But my family are all New Yorkers, and I'm having this little sort of vicarious thrill of almost feeling like I'm in New York at the moment. And of course, also, I think we're all thinking about New York as tomorrow approaches. So I'm going to start with, before I get to the war part, the military part of my talk, I'm just going to spend a few minutes on AI, and I'm going to be using scare quotes. Every time you hear me refer to AI, think that I'm putting scare quotes around it. Because I think that part of the problem is that we are surrounded by talk about AI as if it were a thing and everyone knew what it was. But it's highly it's first of all, it's not a thing. It's very many things, and I'll say a little bit more about that. And secondly, it's incredibly overhyped. And so I should start by saying that I am an AI skeptic. Okay, so what you're going to be hearing is coming from an AI skeptic, and a lot of the work that I do is around demystifying AI so that we can see what it really is in terms of political economies, in terms of technologies, in terms of labor, really importantly, and what it's who's where the vested interests are. So I'm going to see if I can get my screen sharing going here, and tell me if that looks okay to you. Are you seeing a slide that says what is AI? Okay, so just here's some really quick history. So first of all, AI is really kind of a marketing phrase that was coined in 1956 by the computer scientist John McCarthy at a gathering of other interested computer scientists. And it's based on what I think is this very circular definition that artificial intelligence refers to machines that can do things that if people did them, we would say are intelligent. Um, so that, as you can imagine, that's quite slippery. And one of the most important problems that's kind of buried in there is the idea of intelligence. How do we define intelligence? How has intelligence been defined historically and by whom? What are the enormous politics around intelligence? Long histories, not very great histories of eugenically motivated kind of orderings of people according to IQ and so forth. So, we've got this idea of intelligence, which is itself, really open to debate, not at all an innocent idea, but here it's being used as if it were self-evident. So artificial intelligence is referring to machines that can do things that if humans did them, we would say were intelligent. And this is based very much just on the premise that brains are computers. And, again, I'd be glad to talk more about that. This has a long history, but it's now this computational way of thinking about brains that as computers rather than organs that are connected to bodies in very complex ways and all sorts of other bodily systems, hormonal, et cetera, to bodies that are themselves in very complex relations with the worlds that they inhabit. But again, this view is based on the idea that we, in our heads, are effectively computers, and that's where intelligence comes from. And again, we could talk more about the question of how that erases the place of bodies and of social relations and everything else. Okay, so in the 1960s was really when things got started on what was called so-called symbolic AI, knowledge representation. So the idea of trying to represent knowledge, and again here as if, knowledge is something like an encyclopedia rather than a much more embodied relational way of coming to understand the world. But so the idea that knowledge could be represented as a kind of set of, if-then logical propositions. And there were various efforts to represent the knowledge of experts in so-called expert systems. And then there was a huge effort. They kind of figured out, well, actually, experts also rely on their common sense all the time. And so now we have to represent all of common sense. And there was actually a huge project to try to do that. And as you can imagine, it kind of, when you try to represent common sense as propositions, it just expands indefinitely because each proposition presupposes others. And so, these projects, definitely there were some accomplishments, and there are aspects of them that are still around us, very much around us. But as this project of knowledge representation in expert systems kind of ran up against its limits, the result was what's called the AI winter. In other words, government funding started to dry up. AI became a less dominant part of the field of computer science. But this is what's now changed, because by the 2000s, with the advent of the internet, the World Wide Web, now suddenly there was available vast troves of digitized text and images, and the digitized part is really important because that means it's already made computable, right? So everything that gets translated into digital media, all of the textual and image-based content on the internet is already computable. And it's, of course, enormous and growing all the time. And that is accompanied by tremendous increases in computing capacity. And that then revives the so-called these connectionist approaches, as they were called. So we have so-called neural networks, and I'm saying so-called, putting them again in square quotes, because the assumption that the computational networks that we're talking about are like the neurons in the brain, is not something we should accept without question. And so, but these new kinds of approaches of very, very large, high-speed computation over very, very large amounts of data were then developed to find, as the discourse goes, patterns in this body of images and text, which of course have already been rendered as numbers, right? So when large language models are finding patterns in text, they're not really working on text in the sense that we think about it. They're working on text that has been translated into numbers, and they're basically doing a kind of extension of autocomplete. So if you start to type a word and it gets automatically completed, it's because there are statistical analyses of the frequency of that string of letters following the string that you've typed. So this is an enormous expansion of that basic mechanism. And the really important point that I want to emphasize here is that so-called language understanding, computer vision, and I'll say more about that, have nothing to do with understanding and vision in the sense that we know them. at least when they're being computed, all of the language and understanding happens either in the input end with the humans who prepare the input for these systems, and at the output end with the humans who read what comes out and find meaning in it. So that's I think the most important point there. But what we're seeing now is this is an enormous industry, very, very speculative, but with enormous increases in funding provided by venture capital and big tech, which you probably heard about in the previous event that focused on political economy. And then finally, just to say that in 2022, we have the launch of ChatGPT. And I could say more about that, but as an interface to these large language models that are running over everything that's available out on the web. And this creates an enormous kind of new hype round, I would say. And we could talk more in the discussion about this idea that we can converse with our computers and why chat is so compelling for people as a kind of interface to computational machines. And a lot of my work has been about the differences that matter between what's called chat with computers and chat or conversation as we understand it among ourselves. So let me just give another example. This is actually from, let's see, from the earlier days. So one of the early AI, these early AI projects and really continuing to today, were very preoccupied with game worlds, for good reasons, because game worlds are closed worlds, they're rule bound, and chess has always been the favorite. Chess is kind of the measure of intelligence, understood in this very limited way. Chess is obviously very nicely structured. It's a set of rules for manipulating these tokens with different values on a board, where the board gives each of the tokens significance. And it's easy to translate that into executable rules if you're using the if-then kind of artificial intelligence. And the high point of symbolic AI was this moment back in 1997 where there was enormous fanfare around the idea that a machine called Deep Blue that was built by IBM had beat then world chess champion Garry Kasparov. This was, okay, this is it. We've created a machine that's smarter than a human. But if we look a little closer at that, so when I was teaching, I would use this image and I'd say, okay, so here we are. Here's that famous moment when Garry Kasparov played Deep Blue and was defeated. Where is Deep Blue in this picture? So, what we see here is Kasparov. He's, leaning in, he's studying the board. And then across from him, there's a man. We don't know what his name is because he doesn't really matter because he's just the kind of input device. He's the guy who translates what Garry Kasparov is doing on the board into the using the keyboard into the computer that's running to his left, which is in turn attached to a vast array of computer processors somewhere off stage, along with a huge army of technicians. And of course, this moment it's the end product of an enormous amount of human labor. And so Deep Blue is not really a thing. It is this huge network of people and machines, which is now being attributed as if it were a singular thing to having more intelligence than Garry Kasparov. There's a lot more to that story, but I think it gives an indication of how these simple announcements, the greatest chess player in the world has now been defeated by an AI, how they obscure what's really going on. And that continues to this day. Oh, sorry, I want to go. Oh, okay, all right. So now let's stay for a minute with move from these sort of expert systems to the kind of AI that we're talking about now. And let's take computer vision as an example, because computer vision is really important in the military domain. So so it's not about the rules of the game anymore, but it's about these huge data sets. And the state of the art in computer vision was built on an enormous data set shared by all of the researchers who were working on computer vision, which was a database of millions of images that had been pulled from the World Wide Web, and it was called ImageNet. And so here's the simplest case. So these are images from ImageNet, and they're sorted into two categories of dogs and cats. And this is kind of the canonical example. And you can see that each of these images has been labeled. And what happens is humans go through and label an enormous number of these images. The images are then translated from the kinds of photos that we recognize them as into pixels that can be computationally analyzed in terms of how they're arranged. And then very sophisticated analysis is done to identify what correlations of arrangements of pixels map to these two categories of dogs and cats. And again, these are categories that are very, very familiar to us. And they're domestic animals. We can say it's a dog or a cat without really having to have much context for it. And that's very important. And again, here we have a situation where the images, as I said, they don't come with those little labels already on them. That requires the labor of huge numbers of workers. So there are places like this data factory in China, but also increasingly this work of doing data labeling is outsourced as a kind of on-demand gig work to people in the global south who are desperate for the very small amounts of income that the work provides. And so this has been described in the book Ghost Work by Mary Gray and Siddharth Suri as this invisible labor. The now some 20 million people worldwide who work in isolation doing data labeling, and now also content moderation, which we could talk about more, which is a dreadful job of looking at content out on YouTube to try to filter out that which none of us should be exposed to. So we have data labeling and content moderation. These people, because they're working alone as gig workers, they have zero job security. They have no benefits. They have no legal protection. And we're now starting to see some really exciting developments in organizing workers doing this work of data labeling and content moderation. So this is, as an example, because a lot of this work has been outsourced to Kenya, where people conveniently speak English. So this is a coalition between the Data Workers Inquiry Project, which was a project to reach out and really find out about the experience of people doing this kind of work, and the Data Labelers Association, which is effectively an emergent union of data labelers based in Kenya. So that's starting to happen. The one other thing I wanted to mention before I get into the military part is, and I think this has been part of the discussion for you, I understand, and is going to continue to be, is that along with that labor, there are huge environmental issues. So the New York Times recently reported that Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and Meta, those are the four biggest data-hungry corporations, have spent a total of more than 360 billion in capital expenditures over the last 12 months on data centers. Okay, so this is pretty insane. And by 2035, data centers globally are projected to use about as much electricity as India, which is the world's most populous country, and that's from the International Energy Agency. But again, resistance is growing among affected communities because these data centers are often built in areas where there's a lot of land, clearly, and those areas often are deserts. So here we have the No Desert Data Centers Coalition in Tucson, Arizona, fighting back against a proposal for an enormous new data center, and I believe it's Amazon who is behind that data center. And if you want to read more and you want more of an introduction, I have these 3 books to recommend. I'm going to start with the one in the middle, which is the most recent. And it's really a remarkable book, Empire of AI by Karen Howe, who covers the whole range, really gives you the full context from extraction through labor, through the kind of venture investments in these technologies, the history of OpenAI, which is now the biggest AI company, and really attentive to all of the things that matter to us about the issues around AI. And then to sort of just get a better understanding of what's involved technically with AI, there's the wonderful Artificial Unintelligence, How Computers Misunderstand the World by Meredith Broussard. And there is Artificial Intelligence, A Guide for Thinking Humans by Melanie Mitchell. So 3 really great, really readable, accessible books that I would recommend. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the military, and I'm going to start with this image. Okay, so we remember that we talked about dogs and cats as the sort of canonical example of computer vision. So the military has become extremely interested in the possibility of automating computer vision for the identification of objects, particularly given during the so-called war on terror, the enormous building out of drones, surveillance drones, and also weaponized drones as military systems. And so the problem is that the military has built out its surveillance infrastructures to the point where it has so much data that it now needs to automate the analysis of that data. So this is a kind of self-reinforcing cycle. So what does it mean to actually see an object when we move from dogs and cats to the worlds of interest to the US military? So what you're looking at here is a drone pilot's display in a ground control station. So it's showing a truck from the view of a camera on an MQ-9 Reaper drone. And the MQ-9 Reaper is a weaponized so-called hunter-killer unmanned aerial vehicle, and it's designed to engage what the military calls time-sensitive targets on the battlefield. So the idea is that you've got to recognize and decide very quickly whether what you're looking at is something that constitutes an imminent threat and is thereby a legitimate target. And in the military, the project named Project Maven, which was an early project initially with Google, now taken over by the company Palantir. So the idea was that Project Maven would develop automated analysis of drone video footage. So how does this object get identified? Well, we would probably be able to say, well, it's a truck. And using the kind of labeling that's used in computer vision systems, we could probably pretty reliably pick it out as a truck. But in Project Maven, this is categorized as an ISIS pickup truck. Okay, but there's nothing in the truck that makes it an ISIS pickup truck. When we get into talking about this kind of an object, objects take their significance from their context, from their relations to the people and the activities in the worlds that they inhabit. And there's no way you can read that off of this image. And when we're talking about targeting, that becomes really consequential. And this matters a lot to the legitimacy of warfare, because those distinctions are at the foundation of international humanitarian law, where basically what differentiates murder from legally acceptable taking of life turns on this principle of distinction between those who are in combat and pose an imminent threat, and those who are identified either as civilians or as otherwise out of combat. So even if you are a combatant, if you are surrendering or if you've been wounded, then you are, legally speaking, out of combat and you're no longer a legitimate target. And this is a principle that I would say remains crucial as a resource for legal accountability in the face of what we know now is its systematic violation in actual war fighting. So we could talk more about that in the discussion. But I just want to say, particularly for our generation, that this vision, the US military vision of a kind of perfect data-driven command and control system, can be traced back at least to US operations in Southeast Asia in the 1960s. And here's the vision, which was articulated in 1969 by General William Westmoreland, who many of you will remember, who was then Chief of Staff of the US Army, and he offered these thoughts to his colleagues over lunch. He said, "On the battlefield of the future, enemy forces will be located, tracked, and targeted almost instantaneously through the use of data links, computer-assisted intelligence evaluation, and automated fire control. I see battlefields on which we can destroy anything we locate through instant communications and the almost instantaneous application of highly lethal firepower. With cooperative effort, no more than 10 years should separate us from the automated battlefield." So the important things to note here are that the ways in which this is the kind of what we call the military imaginary. This is the vision, the military vision of the sort of perfect command and control system. And the things that he's pointing to, data links, computer-assisted intelligence evaluation, automated fire control, as we're going to see, are still very much with us now. And they're still very much with us in spite of the fact that this vision has yet to be realized. So we know that the US effort to implement this vision in Vietnam was an infamous failure. This year's actually the 50th anniversary of the US military defeat in Vietnam. But in spite of that, this idea of a kind of data-driven omniscience, being able to know everything and then automate the analysis of that intelligence and increasingly automate the actual operation of weapon systems is unfortunately alive and well. And as I said, the thing that has been realized in those intervening years is the building out of these infrastructures of surveillance that now, again, are the rationale for developing more automated modes of analysis. So here's the new version of Westmoreland's vision. This was presented in a press conference in 2021 by Charles Pope, who was then Secretary of the Air Force. And he announced the so-called Joint All-Domain Command and Control, or JADC2 initiative. And he says, as envisioned, JADC2 will allow U.S. forces from all services to sense, make sense, and act upon a vast array of data and information, fusing and analyzing the data with the help of machine learning and artificial intelligence, and providing warfighters with preferred options at speeds not seen before. Does this sound familiar? Indeed, it is the reanimation of this ongoing desire on the part of the military. So what does this look like in practice? And here, sadly, we go to current events in Israel, Gaza. Because here we can see what this means in practice, including the violations of international humanitarian law that are accelerated by data-driven targeting. And this has become very clear with the reported application of AI, specifically machine learning, to targeting by the IDF in Israel's assault on Gaza. So we've had a series of investigative reports, really remarkable investigative reports, published in the Israeli-Palestinian outlets Plus 972 and Local Call, where Israeli journalist Yuval Abraham has given us detailed accounts of two of the IDF's current systems, named Habsora, or the Gospel and Lavender. The first report, which was published in November of 2023, drawing on sources within the Israeli intelligence community, who confirmed that IDF operations in the Gaza Strip sanctioned the bombing of built structures in densely populated civilian areas, including, as we know, residential public buildings. And the official guidelines require that to bomb a building, you have to have identified that there is a legitimate military target within that building, and in principle, the building should be empty at the time that you destroy it. And of course, the latter has resulted in the IDF issuing this constant and changing succession of, increasingly unfeasible evacuation orders to the Gazans who are trapped in smaller and smaller areas. So we have the bombing of residential buildings, and the other thing that accompanies this is the acceleration of the targeting cycle. So if you think about, a Netflix recommender system, we now have a target recommendation systems that are designed to generate as many targets as possible in as short a period of time as possible. And this means that, and then that the second story, which was published in April of last year, takes this targeting recommendation system from buildings to individuals. So this is a system dedicated to targeting individuals who are designated as being suspected low-level Hamas militants. And of course, in the occupied territories, there's just enormous amounts of surveillance data on individuals. I mean, you have not only the aerial imagery from satellites, but you have cell phone signals that are taken as proxies for where people are and how they move around. You have all sorts of biometric registration at hundreds of checkpoints with facial recognition systems. You have monitoring of digital communications and social media. And so again, here, 37,000 people in Gaza who had been registered in the system were matched against the profile of a profile setup of known Hamas fighters, and were scored according to the number of matches they had with the features of that profile. And that generated the target lists for the bombing. Okay, I think I've taken up too much time, so I should skip ahead and just say that there is increasing opposition to the participation of U.S. corporations, and particularly big tech, in these systems, providing big tech, basically providing the so-called cloud services, which is really data centers where all of this data is stored, and then helping out with their AI experts, helping out with the development of the systems of analysis. And again here, Plus 972, Yuval Abraham has worked with The Guardian, and they recently disclosed that Microsoft's Azure platform for cloud storage was actually being used in this targeting, and Microsoft, to their credit, actually withdrew access to that part of the system. But Amazon and Google continue to participate in that. And so I will end there. And sorry, I think I went over a bit, but.
Lucy, in no way did you go over. This is Joan speaking, and I'll take questions now. I need to see. Please put up, if you could, a Zoom hand, and those are the Zoom hands you find under reactions down at the bottom where it says react, and then a little yellow or brown or whatever color hand you may have indicated goes up. I call on Marcia Newfield first.
Okay, thank you. I'm trying to take notes on this. It's a little over the top. I mean, how to encompass, my bottom line question right now is, what can stop any of this? I mean, I don't quite the line from the image, from the dogs and cats and the image accumulation to targeting. I understand that's the genius of it all. But what's going to stop them from targeting me right now in my
Yes.
bed?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And it's a big question, right? Because it's tied to pushing back. That's why I put up the slide about from international humanitarian law about the principle of distinction. Because I feel like we're at a moment where on the one hand, the legal frameworks that we have for challenging whether it's the our the rights that we have to our data, to push back on surveillance, to challenge war fighting in terms of what counts as legitimate killing and within the really quite narrow confines of international humanitarian law. And so, on the one hand, all of those legal frameworks are being undermined. And on the other hand, I think that means not that we give up on them, but on the contrary, that we now have to really double down on invoking, reinforcing, strengthening those legal frameworks. And then there are lots of different legal frameworks that can be resources for pushing back on this. So I think that's one really important thing. We have the International Criminal Court, we have the International Court of Justice. However much the US discredits those institutions, however much they are criticized for not having real sort of teeth and enforcement power, I think they're absolutely crucial. And the other thing is coalitions of against violence, war. I was going to put up a slide of Combatants for Peace, which is one of my most admired organizations in Israel, Gaza. And so all of the anti-war mobilization that happened around Vietnam, I think, it's those social movements I think that are going to be crucial here, and it's really coming back to it's integral to all of the already ongoing social movements around civil liberties, around the regulation of and opposition to war, and so forth that we've always relied on and that are more important than ever. And I know that's a really big and vague answer. And of course, it's got to be specific for each of us and sort of where we put our efforts. But all these things are so tied together, right? That this is part of the wider social movement that I think tomorrow's election, for example, is so much a part of.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. Mary Ann Peta.
Yeah, thank you for this presentation. It was too short rather than too long, because there's so much there. And I want to say something in relation to Marcia's question, and then I have a question for you, Lucy. It seems to me like it's really important that activists focus on the corporations um, that are creating this so-called artificial intelligence, as you call it, because those are kind of, that feels a little bit like, the Wizard of Oz. You have Trump, who's so big and makes such a big noise and stink and smoke and mirrors and this and that, but the figures that are behind him, like Palantir's Peter Thiel, they're very much in the shadows and they want to stay there. They really do not want to be exposed, and they have multiple companies. And I don't know which one of the companies is Palantir, I guess, is the one that has the military contract with Israel, but there
Yes.
are other companies with military and we need to focus on that, because Trump will come or go, but those people do not go.
Yeah.
And they will continue to work their, I want to use a word like deviltry. I don't, that's not even a word.
Yeah.
And here I am, an English major, but I'm struggling for the right word to talk about how
Yeah.
evil,
Yeah. I
So I
couldn't
think
agree
that's
more.
really important to look at the companies that are making money off of this mess. And Palantir in particular is uniting data from all different parts of our government to
Yeah.
be able to target people, as you said, Marcia, where they live, like immigrants when they walk out of their children's school. that data is united so that people can be found easily. So I don't know if you have any thoughts about Palantir in particular, of all of them, that seems so evil. What do you think
I'm
about how they can be targeted?
Yeah, I'm laughing, Marion, because I'm obsessed with Palantir. I mean,
Me too.
I have a daily alert on Palantir. I follow everything they do. I think they are the height of evil corporations. And Alex Karp, who is the CEO, is yeah. So Palantir is just a company that has made itself the data integrator and they are promising the military the sort of perfect command and control dashboard, with a chat interface so that you can, get your intelligence and formulate your command, your orders of command. And they're doing everything for the military, as you say now, through domestic surveillance. So absolutely, I think those corporations are key. And I would again really recommend Empire of AI by Karen Howe because it lays that out. That is the focus of that book. And it lays it out. It lays it out very clearly. And I guess the hopeful thing there is there's tech worker organizing going on
Yes.
increasingly.
Yes.
There's no tech for Azure aimed at Microsoft. There's no tech for apartheid, which is Google Amazon workers, about the ways in which Google and Amazon are providing the services specifically in the occupied territories. But there's more and more tech worker organizing going on. They've gotten more. People are getting fired for it now. But that, I think that's another source of, that's another piece of the social movement that is really crucial, and the disclosing of the incredible vested interests. And unfortunately, right now, conflict of interest has been erased in favor of expertise. So the revolving door where corporate actors advise the Pentagon and vice versa is no longer even discussed in terms of possible conflict of interest. It's just, well, these are the guys who have the expertise. So, of course, they're the ones who should be advising us. Never mind that they have huge vested interests in promoting these technologies to the military. So that's a whole other area. And there are people watching that and trying to, uncover those conflicts of interest and so forth. So, yeah, that's crucial.
Marianne, thank you for that. Palmer and Francis. I never know which is the first name.
Well, Palmer's sitting next to me.
Okay.
Lucy, you put up an image of a truck and said it was identified as a truck, but then later on it was identified as an ISIS truck. I'm wondering, our government is sort of blowing up a couple of boats by Venezuela, saying that these are drug carrying boats. Is AI misidentifying them? AI has created a human being that is so realistic that they are doing a whole film with this female human being. We just don't know what is real anymore. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering what we can do about it.
Yeah, I mean, those are two huge and interrelated issues, right? I mean, it's really interesting. I hadn't thought and I haven't heard stories about whether AI systems are being used in the identification of the boats to blow up in the Caribbean. Excuse me, but it's a really good analogy because basically there is no due process, right?
Mhm.
Somebody decides to identify you as a legitimate target.
Mhm.
And some people now, including the person running our country, doesn't really care if they're legitimate targets, right? He just cares that they're convenient targets for his narrative about drug smuggling and about how, he's going to kill everybody who's bringing drugs into the United States. So again, the lawlessness of that, I think, is really unbelievable, right? And these are war crimes. There's just no question about it. And that's why, we need much stronger institutions to enforce that. And then the other thing that you're pointing to is the kind of ways that these systems can recombine the material that they get from all of the text, all of the images that's available, and recombine it into things that are plausible or even like seem completely realistic, but that are entirely made up, right? And so this is where we really need regulation is essential. I mean, there just has to be some, and again, people are pushing back. People who find themselves being artificially recreated are getting rather annoyed about it, right? And so that
I
again,
can't talk now.
in terms of what we can do, I sort of hope that again, mobilizing those people who are either the ingredients that are being used in the manufacture. And, I recently got a query from Cambridge University Press about whether I would be happy to have my book um, turned over for use by large language model training, along with, all of the other stuff. Now, Cambridge makes a big deal of the fact that they're asking their authors to consent to that. And what's happened is they've gotten some kind of a proposal that they'll get some money back. That these big corporations won't just rip off all of the stuff that's out there, but there'll actually be some compensation for the press and maybe even for the authors. I said, no way. My words are already out there being turned into the word salad, that large language models create. I don't want to contribute to that in any way, shape, or form, right? And so I think more and more of those of us whose these are our images, these are our words, we have to insist that we have rights to what happens to those, and that there needs to be some accountability when we find that our words or our images are being misused and ripped off from us, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Thank you. Nancy next, and then Eileen, and then I think we're going to move on to higher education and Brit Paris.
Thank you, Joan and Lucy. Lucy, what a great presentation. You really expanded my understanding quite a lot, and also my anxiety, which is already at a pretty high level on these issues. I mean, to me, you're speaking to a much more muscular and progressive government that we are in desperate need of, because yes, expertise seems to be important some of the times, but loyalty seems to be more important in the present federal government. So I'm particularly concerned about the question of the environment and jobs. So, the environmental justice movement is very aware of the amount of energy and water that's necessary for these massive data centers. And it dovetails with drill, baby, drill. And there's no way that we can possibly create enough renewable energy to energize these centers or create enough water. And they don't seem to be very interested in areas that they're not concerned about areas that have droughts. So how we're going to settle that, I don't know. But the other question I have about jobs and labor. So you talked about data center workers organizing, which is great. And of course, the early organizers are getting fired. But I'm concerned about the labor movement writ large, of which we are part of, and the concern for getting rid of jobs that require any kind of knowledge or creativity.
Yeah.
My son is a composer, and he said to me, in 10 years, I will have no work, maybe less than 10 years, because they'll just use music that's already out there and apply that to whatever other, whatever platforms are there. And that will be true for so many of the arts and for intellectual work. So if the labor movement doesn't get in on this early and really take a strong stand against AI and not see it as a way to make the jobs easier, but rather sees it as a way of taking away jobs, we're going to be in very bad shape for the future, and especially universities. So I don't know if you have any knowledge of how the labor movement as a movement is responding to this.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, this this is the time for collective organizing, right? And we can look at the screenwriters. One of the most effective labor actions has been the screenwriters, and it was against exactly that kind of appropriation of the work of screenwriters and composers and musicians and so forth. So there are specific domains of labor action, and those need to get more and more joined up, right? Because these problems are interconnected. I mean, again, in the data, in terms of the tech workers who I was talking about are not the people who work in the data centers, but the people who work for Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Meta, right? So those folks are starting to organize. The data centers are interesting because they affect communities, and so communities are starting to organize. And indeed, they are. They're built in water scarce places, and these data centers need potable water. Okay, they need water that is pure enough to cool their computer system. So it's really egregious, and we don't need these data centers. There's nothing inevitable about any of this, right? These data centers are being built on a speculative basis. They are being built on the promise that if things can be scaled sufficiently and there's enough data, then the promise of artificial intelligence and what they call artificial general intelligence will be realized. This is pure speculation, and there is nothing inevitable about it. It is up to us collectively to stop this, really. And so I agree with you completely, and we know it's a big uphill struggle. But my hope is that more and more people, differently located people, and again, there's also a lot of really important work being done, much more local levels, city levels, boards of supervisors, as is the case with New York, that that some of the demonstration of the kind of coalitions that need to be built, those demonstrations can happen around specific sites of data centers, specific areas of job, the sort of diminishing and replacement of jobs. So yeah, I'm preaching to the choir here. I know.
Here comes the chorus, and it's Eileen Moran.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess one of the questions I had, because I'm trying to think of, like, again, what can the pushback be? And I guess in my head, it's also boycott. And that may be boycotting may be one of the things that the labor movement can help organize, in the same way that the example you gave, which was so horrific, of the Palestinians being like just destroyed, was that, again, anybody peace movement can also do the same thing, to boycott Amazon, boycott Google, because we saw how quickly the corporate elites turn their heads around. So I don't know, I sort of have a sense of what you might see budding that we're not seeing quite yet. That could be that pushback.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think boycotts are another really important. I mean, it is really hard to boycott. I find it much easier to boycott Amazon, which I do, than to boycott Microsoft, which I rely on for just about everything in my life at this point. So, but still, we can, the fact that Microsoft, in response to the huge amounts of pushback and bad publicity they got when it was revealed that they were actually supporting the data-driven targeting by the IDF. That was sufficient for them to actually close down that part of their operation with the IDF. So I think, yeah, there's public opinion boycotting, noisy, obstreperous employees who increasingly are taking more and more risk because they're getting fired. But there is that is another really important resource, I think, for pushing back on this in whatever ways we can. And personally, I don't find it too hard to boycott Meta, Facebook, but I know that's also hard for some people. So
It sounds very much like a topic coming up that we need to address is pushback in all of its various forms. Lucy Suchman, thank you so much.
you're very welcome. And I didn't say anything about higher education, but I'm really looking forward to what Britt has to say. And I kind of thank my lucky stars every day that I'm retired from teaching at the moment because I wouldn't want to have to deal with
Don't we
stuff.
all? So let me introduce Britt Paris. Um, uh, Britt is an associate professor at our sister or cousin school in Rutgers and the Rutgers School of Communication and Information. And Britt is also, and very importantly from our perspective, a chair of the AAUP committee on AI in education. So we're going to really pick up where we left off. I do want to say a couple of facts about Britt, and I forgot to mention some human facts about Lucy. So about Britt is she lives on a farm in New Jersey in the Pine Barrens, a beautiful area, where she shares her vegetables, chickens, and geese with food pantries and with neighbors. Britt.
Thanks so much. I'm very honored to be here today. I've heard so much about the great work that you all do in the Professional Staff Congress, and truly to be invited by Joan Greenbaum and speak on a panel with Lucy Suchman, who are absolutely luminaries to all of this working in the field of critical scholarship and activism and information and technology fields. It's truly an honor that I can barely, do justice in my articulation of it. So I'm really going to be picking up where Lucy left off, or the last couple of questions to Lucy left off about what we can do about any of this. I'm going to share some slides here. Hoping you all can see that and it's not blurry. Let me know if I need to do anything. Okay. So this is my sort of punchy title of my talk, right? AI is over if we want it. All of these structures are much more brittle than they would like us to believe. And we have a lot of power if we, organize in solidarity. So that's the sort of, provocative title I've been using in higher education is AI is over if we want it. Because it is really, especially when we're talking about how a lot of this technology is being deployed in higher education. It's not because it's good. It's not because people like it. It's not because it deserves to be there. It's helping higher education. It's simply because consultants are coming in and talking to our chief information officers and getting sweetheart deals with them. That's it, right? So this is a map of my talk. I may move through some of this stuff depending on how much time we have, some of it more quickly than other parts of it. But I want to also highlight that I'm talking here a lot about work that I've been doing with the AAUP Higher Education, AAUP Ad Hoc Committee on AI in the Profession. And I have our committee members listed here. This is very much a group effort that we are continuing. We started in 2024 and we are working on this every single day. So this is not just me talking here. This is my, I'm the sort of voice of my committee today. Okay. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the context that we're talking about here that you're all familiar with, right? So we see a breathlessness of adoption in higher education. And this is noteworthy, not just for its implementation, but how it is reshaping academic activities or promising to reshape academic activities on campuses that are so often very slow to change, right? In a number of different ways. But at the same time, we know, and I think many of you, Joan talked about this at the very beginning. We know that this is just the newest version of the story of the neoliberal gutting of public goods like education and the structural issues that go with it. And this has been happening for a long time, both within universities and beyond. Tech companies are angling to serve, much as Lucy was talking about in the sort of war machines. Tech companies are angling to serve as both the chassis and the engine, or both the infrastructure and the driver of knowledge production in higher education, as well as the relationships around higher education today to the ends of profit, control over truth, and control over, the knowledge of how to live and live with one another and live well. And it's doing this all for the ends of profit. So, as universities increasingly adopt AI tools for academic work, their dependence on platforms and this commercial big tech who is deeply invested in the conservative government and vice versa. So, these companies are getting huge subventions from the government as well. This dependence is deepening. It's strengthening these firms' ability to exercise power through control over information infrastructure to the detriment of higher education's mission and its commitments to teaching, research, and service, right? And so here we have a couple of examples. These are some early, not the earliest, but some of the most notable interventions of AI into higher education with the Cal State deployment of the AI University, which included NVIDIA, Google, OpenAI, and Microsoft. And I believe there are a couple more, but I can't think of them off the top of my head. Getting a sweetheart deal, a $17 million deal with Cal State University, which represents over 500 students and the data flows of 500,000 students. Even as the university at the same time was in a budget crisis, they were cutting classes, they were cutting contingent faculty, and claimed that they were in a $5 million budget deficit. So, they're claiming on one hand that they have to cut educators, and on the other hand, they're spending $17 million on unproven technologies. Whoop. Okay, so the takeaways here that I want to really highlight is just, everything that I'm talking about here is based on member-driven engagement. We've developed recommendations and organizing resources that address issues connected to AI in higher education. In higher education, sort of like what Lucy was talking about, with the military-industrial surveillance complex. AI is also being used as a weapon against our communities, with ICE, that you all talked about the example with ICE and Palantir. It's also being used as a weapon against higher education, which the conservative government at present doesn't want to exist at all, or doesn't want to exist in the way that it has for a long time. But we need not panic. We need to organize for control over technology at our institutions. These are our main takeaways. And I have a QR code up here that will take you to our report that highlights a lot of our research and rationale and recommendations. So I want to put in the chat a report, and I'm going to try to do that here. There it is. There's the link to our report. Now I have too many windows up. Okay. Okay, so like Lucy was saying, AI is a marketing term. It's usually referring to infrastructures and different components of infrastructures of what we might call data-intensive technology that is based on statistical methods applied to large language models to analyze, make predictions and recommendations that is also used to generate images, text, and video content. And a lot of the time, AI technology is built into legacy educational technology. So things like the Microsoft, Office suite that we're all relatively dependent on in higher education. New AI tools are sort of put into these educational technologies, these legacy educational technologies that have already been a problem in higher education because of their intractability towards governance solutions, and the way that they are, deployed as a software as a service that is continually updating. Universities have contracts with these educational technologies, and these educational technologies, as they update, can institute anything that they want to into these updates, which has now included a bunch of AI tools that nobody can turn off, right? So I want to talk a little bit about what's grounding a lot of what I'm talking about here. So, like I was saying earlier, we've done a lot of engagement with our members. So last year, about this time, we did a big survey with 500 folks. So we got 500 responses in just 2 weeks, which shows us that people have a lot to say and a lot of things that they think about AI and the AI deployment. And this was even before, the dramatic uptick that we've seen in the earlier months of the Trump administration. We did interviews with folks last spring, and we've been doing events across AAUP and other sectors, higher education, federal workers, etc. Over the last, I would say, over the last 6 months or so since our report has been finished. Really hearing from folks and what their concerns are, what their needs are, and what they want, and what they would like to see in terms of organizing moving forward. So, all right. Whoop. Got too many screens going on here. All right. So the main thing that we saw in our surveys way back in December is that, unsurprisingly, decisions about technology are made from the top down at institutions. And like I was saying earlier, institutions often have no say or not willing to push back against software updates that include AI into already existing tools and legacy platforms. So like I was saying earlier, now all Microsoft products come with Copilot, an AI product, and it comes turned on. You can't choose not to use. You can choose not to use it, but it's there. And no one knows what exactly it's doing with your data because they are an institutional partner and their AI partners are institutional partners. And nobody knows exactly what is happening with the intellectual property housed within those Microsoft documents or email, right? But we all know that likely it's going into their large language models and training, future iterations of AI technology based on your own intellectual property because that's their bread and butter. That's how they work. So these are a few quotes that we've heard from members. We see the administrations in a bind in a lot of these situations because they've drank the Kool-Aid that AI can revolutionize education, or because they are uncritical of the disruption narratives that that these technology companies push. And they do this in ways that degrade learning and degrade working conditions. And nobody really wants to use it. And since nobody wants to use it, they force it, right? So the reason you can't turn it off is because they want to sort of push it down your throat. So you're forced to use it. You're forced to, even as the person in this second quote here says, you don't want to use it because you might actually like it. And if you like it, then you'll use it, right? So it being sort of right there at the top of your Microsoft Word document or, instituted at the top of your inbox is a very sort of tricky bait and switch, if you want to think about it that way, and shows us that like the adoption of this stuff is brittle. They're pushing us to use it because nobody really wants to use it. And the folks who do use it are folks who, by definition, feel uncomfortable or not confident in their skill set, right? They deployed it for free in 2023, and the people who took it up were, by definition, folks who were learning skills, our students, right? And it was offered to students for free, again, in this sort of tricky maneuver so that our students use it so that then these technology companies can go to these educational institutions and be like, hey, your students are using it. You might as well use it so that you can, engage with them, teach them how to use this AI technology responsibly and appropriately for, the future generation of workers. When again, this is all sort of tricky maneuvers and marketing hype that's being sold to us as, a necessary good tool that's, to be used for the future of higher education. All right. So this speaks to what I was just talking to. So there's a significant concern, I would say, in the folks that we've been talking to across, across institutions and across sectors about how students come in from under-resourced schools who are locked in and not confident in their skill set. They are, hooked, and once you have these users hooked, you have a user for life. So students get locked in, and then these tech companies can run a business-to-business software to bureaucratic institutions like higher education. Listen, we know where we're at. Like schools and universities where a lot of this stuff gets introduced in ways that is really hard to push back on. And this quote here at the bottom, this whole interview, this person was talking about, it's a whole lot of work to incorporate AI into the classroom in the way that they're getting, 3 or 4 emails a day from their administration that they need to be themselves engaging in AI literacy. They need to be pushing AI literacy to their students. And then meanwhile, they're dealing with students who are using ChatGPT to, do coursework. And, in the end, this person here said that, I'm not paid for this extra work, and the support I receive for this is laughable. This is a huge working conditions issue. And, the fact that it's being pushed by our administration really is very concerning to me. So just I gave you here a few examples of the types of things that people are saying about AI in higher education. There are many more in the report. You can go click on it. And I'm more than happy to talk with any of you if you email me about, any questions you may have, and you can have raise some of your questions in the Q&A. But we have 4 main recommendations that we think will be helpful. And the first of which seems pretty flat-footed maybe, but it's something that doesn't exist very many places with, significant teeth that changes anything. So we need to implement shared governance and oversight around technology. And this needed to happen a long time ago, right? And a lot of the time, even when there is quote unquote shared governance around technology, they're there as a rubber stamping mechanism to just, pass whatever the CIO, the Chief Information Officer, has, suggested to the committee. So we want our shared governance boards to be able to have access to the information about procurement of these technologies and to give meaningful recommendations about these technologies, and to also, once these technologies are accepted, maybe provisionally by the university or by the higher education institution, to be able to audit these on an ongoing basis for, issues of discrimination, of decreased working or poor working conditions and learning conditions. And really, I think an audit of how effective a particular tool is and how well it lives up to its claims should also be on the list of things this technology oversight board should be able to introduce. So let's see. So where people use AI, there, within our survey and within our engagements with folks, we've seen people who say they use AI. They use it to write emails. They use it to write letters of recommendation. They use it to do all of these things that they think they don't have time for, right? And in higher education, we're all pressed for time. The institution has been defunded for over 40 years, and this is not something that's new, right? But where people use AI for these particular tasks of, We've even heard grading relating to students, writing emails, letters of recommendations. These are all relational activities that undergird what education is, right? And it points, I think, more importantly, to where people are under-resourced. And that for a union, for, a national higher education union, this is a good indicator to us of something that we can, that we can intervene in, right? Like this is the purview of a union, is to focus on where people are under-resourced and try to get those resources for them. So let's see. These are our main things here. Moving on. Whoop. This is a huge thing. So like I was talking about earlier with the Microsoft issue, with Copilot and no ability to opt out, a lot of folks were really concerned about the fact that this technology is, deployed in their institution. There's no critical engagement with this technology. There's no member involvement with the procurement or deployment process. Students and professors have no oversight, no ability to opt out, or even to know necessarily what these educational technologies or AI technologies that are instituted in these legacy technologies, what they even do, right? The fact that we have to pretty much guess about what our data, what data within Microsoft is going to feed the LLMs, like this in itself is a huge problem. One respondent flatly said that this technology, meaning the AI intervention into Canvas learning management systems, has become a tool of surveillance by the administration. And so in addition to, the unproven nature of this technology, the fact that it can be used to, surveil workers, to surveil learners, to surveil instructors, I think that in addition to the fact that the federal administration is asking for all sorts of information on what happens in classrooms and what is said in classrooms, and people are getting fired for the types of things that they say in classrooms. And the fact that a lot of these AI technologies CEOs who are in the front row of Donald Trump's inauguration should give us some pause, right? And at least we should have the ability to opt out. And so across job categories, over 95% of the workers that we talked to in the surveys were worried about increased reliance on contingent appointments and declining wages. They were significantly concerned about academic freedom and intellectual property rights. And when you bound the survey results to just part-time faculty, they were nearly unanimous on both of these points, right? So we need to do more, especially for those of us who have, bargaining contracts and can bargain for these things. We need to bargain for better protections around intellectual property rights at a minimum, as well as academic freedom. As well as, do ongoing audits to see how much this is affecting contingent appointments and declining wages, and be able to push back meaningfully either through grievances or lawsuits or other means to, push back on some of this technology that is uncritically deployed. And so, the takeaway here is that, now, as always, instructor working conditions are student learning conditions. A lot of this stuff that we're seeing with AI in higher education is stuff that we have been seeing over the last 40 years from, mail-in correspondence classes to massive online courses to, the influencer-centric teaching modalities that arose after COVID-19. Everything that's happening with AI in higher education is very contested in reality. They are trying to paint a picture. I think, the AI hype machine and the AI boosters are trying to paint a picture that like a lot of people in higher education really like using AI, or that students really like using AI. But what we have found in reality is that's not true, right? And that a lot of the decisions are made in ways that are easily contested within higher education governance structures. We simply need to, get together and act solidarity and do it. So that's what I mean when I say AI is over in higher education if we want it, right? It takes a lot of work, but it's something that we can do. So we have, to that end, we have a bunch of chapter resources here. So this is bargaining language that we have collected from across different sectors. So higher ed is interestingly a sector where there isn't a whole lot of existing language around AI. There is not even a whole lot of language around educational technology. Now, what we do have around educational technology, for the most part, can certainly be updated and made more enforceable in the age of AI. So, for example, at Rutgers, we have a clause in our contract that protects intellectual property, and any intellectual property that is submitted through an online platform, right? And so this was proposed way back in the days of the beginning of Blackboard and Canvas and learning management systems like that. But I think now what we are going to do at Rutgers, for example, is to push for protections against AI and our intellectual property and push for, the shared governance board that can oversee a lot of this stuff. And we are looking to have the shared governance board, be an institutional mechanism that is independent from administration. That is one of the problems that you see so often, is that these institutional technology boards are often captured by administration, and so they just rubber stamp, right? So we're looking to develop one within our unions that is constantly and critically reviewing our contracts and our procurement practices by getting in at the executive level. We also have a number of examples a number of recommendations within our report. And for each of those recommendations in our report, we have drawn language from other sectors and even, higher education, a couple of higher education examples where we have this model language that individual locals can use to develop their own contract language, because a lot of the time this stuff is very specific and locally contingent, right? To the contract that you have and the stuff that you want. The University of Miami in Ohio recently got a contract in 2024, and in their contract, they amazingly got, and this is in the language guide, they got the ability to make prior decisions around educational technology, and now they can use this to have prior decision making, transparency, and pushback within their union. So this is great. I have the QR code here. There's a link at the bit.ly here. Let me see if I can get this document in the chat for you.
It's
there?
where- Yeah, Bonnie put a link.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, and we're just about out of time.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so I just wanted to say one more thing. So, we have a big strategy here. So what we want to do is, start with robust worker and student oversight around AI. We're currently working with folks in localized scenarios who were, on the topic of data centers, who are engaging with local environmental groups, pushing back against data center construction in these local communities where there are institutions who have signed on to this, AI partnership that many of these institutions have signed on to, and they're building these data centers to supplement or to facilitate these AI partnerships. So they're partnering. Academics within this institution are partnering with community members who are working on pushing back against data center construction. This is happening in Michigan, and we're also starting to do this in New Jersey. I know University of Arizona is working toward that, as well as a few of the UC and Cal State system schools in California there, and especially in Southern California. So we're working a lot on policy and outreach right now. This is I apologize, this slide has very small font, but these are the things that we're up to. We're more than happy to talk to you or any groups that you belong to about any of these things. You know, we offered the contract bargaining language as a tool that folks can use to push back within their institutions. And we're really interested to hear how that works and what else you need. So thanks so much, everybody. Thank you all for the work that you do. It's been an honor to be here and talking to you.
Wow. Thank you, Britt Paris. It sounds like we at the PSC have a lot of work to start doing. And among them is the fact that, as you point out, these are working conditions. And for years and years and years, unions, and particularly academic unions, have pretended like, well, technology, I don't know anything about that. Sounds like we have to start by finding out what are the software packages and platforms that CUNY is buying, and what aspects of AI is embedded in them, starting with Copilot. John Hyland, you're first up.
Oh,
You were right the first time. Nope,
Yeah,
you're on mute.
There you
there I
are.
am. Okay, thank you. That was, but both presentations were out of sight. So I want to thank you first of all. With the second thing, three things struck me that might come out of this, right? I mean, I would hope that this would not be a one-shot wow. It deserves a wow, but not just a one-shot wow. Three things struck me. One was that the PSC could, I would hope, hire a staff person to concentrate on technology and its implications for working conditions, student learning conditions, and so forth. I think this is so important that it's important to put resources into a direct, ongoing addressing of these issues that have been laid out. Secondly, the possibility of organizing a CUNY center for the freedom or the liberation of technology in higher education, something like that. The grad center, as I remember it, has had a number of centers for studying of European societies, or centers for the study of X, Y, or Z. I think it would be very appropriate at this time to do something like that, to use the resources of the university to address this. And the third is that running through all of this and underneath all of this is what I consider the root of the problem, which is capitalism. And I think that our hesitation to use the C word is problematic. It's to me, it's counterproductive. I think many people understand that is the driving force here. And if we can't talk about it, if we can't say it, if we can't address it, I think we're trying to deal with something that's very important with our hands and arms tied behind our back. So those are the three things that struck me coming out of these wonderful presentations.
Thank you, John. Britt, do you want to comment on that, or should we go
Oh,
on?
those are wonderful observations and recommendations, I never know who everybody is in the room that I'm talking to, so I have to be, I have to be a little good in terms of like going on my full on, communist Marxist perspectives on technology, which I do have, as you probably can tell. But no, you're right. You're 100% right about, we need to really think about the capitalist roots of technology, and this highlights very nicely. I have a book coming out in January on this very topic, and thinking through a critique of technology with regard to a lot of Rosa Luxemburg's thoughts on infrastructure and imperialism and, ways that might be different, ways that we can think about, doing other things than, massive expansion of technology under a sort of capitalist dictum.
Britt,
But
would you put the new book, because I
oh,
forgot to mention that,
yes,
in the chat, please?
of course.
And then I'll call on Erwin.
The use of unions to fight back against AI is, of course, a very powerful tool if the union's contract covers that issue. But working conditions is often a very tricky term because administrations often define it very narrowly, and it becomes a question of whether AI falls into that category. But there is another tool, and you mentioned it, and that is, of course, the governance structure. And the AUP has a document that goes back, I think, to the 1960s on the government of colleges and universities that was signed on to by administration, not just by faculty. And in that document, it makes it very clear that faculty have a responsibility, the primary responsibility for methods of instruction. And if AI is not a method of instruction, then I don't know what it is. So it seems to me that that is a basic tool that we can use. Administrations have long ago accepted that faculty have that prime responsibility. Faculty senates, you've mentioned it in your talk. Faculty senate should set up boards to deal with this. They should make it a primary concern. They should not simply accept administration arguments about it. But I think it's built into the very governance structure of American universities, and we should use it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really helpful place to guide us. I think that there's so much to be said in terms of AI and like constituting mandatory subjects of bargaining or not, but also in AAUP we have a lot of our locals are not bargaining chapters, right? So
Right.
in that document we also have resolution language to that end. But yeah, I mean, it's really helpful that they've sort of made this bed for themselves as they talk about AI revolutionizing, work and working conditions, that they've been so clear and concentrated on that, because now we can use that, in exactly the way that you say, Erwin. So yeah, I'm excited about that in our upcoming bargaining sessions that we have coming up at Rutgers.
And Erwin, could you, as the good historian that you are, find us this 1960s wording?
Yes, it's in the AUP policy documents and reports, what's called the Red Book. This is what it looks like. A new edition just came out, and it's in there. So,
Great.
and I think you can also get it online by going to the AUP website.
Britt and Lucy, I can't think of any more any better speakers on these specifics of things that we need to know about and things that we need to act on. And I think there's
Yeah.
going to be a lot coming out. Lucy, did you want to say?
I did. I wanted to say reciprocally that this is perhaps the most wonderful audience I've ever spoken to about these things, and the most thoughtful and on the point questions. So thank you all for that. And I'm going away newly inspired, hopeful,
Despite your cold.
despite my cold.
Well, we want to thank both of you very much. It was a fruitful almost 2 hours. We have a few more minutes and we wanted to turn our attention to Debbie Bell for a little bit of healthcare update. So where is Debbie? Is she around? I know she's here. I saw her name. Jessica. Do you know where Debbie is? I don't see Jessica either. Hold on, let me look.
Debbie's here. She's a co-host, but maybe she got distracted.
I'll take this dead time to say thank you all so much for having me. I will second Lucy's note on the fact that this has been a really wonderful experience, and truly to follow Lucy Suchman and be invited by Joan Greenbaum, what a dream. I'll be telling people about this for a long time. So thank you all for having me.
I think we all really learned a lot, and that was the thing that we were hoping for today. So thanks, that was great.
And I think we're going to have someone say a word about the election coming up and how.
Oh, yes, maybe we can
here
take a
participate.
moment for, is Nancy Roma still here and or Eileen to tell us how we could contribute to the election tomorrow? Who's here? Eileen.
And Nancy too.
Go ahead, Nancy.
Hi. Yeah, I'm just, I'm hoping that everyone who has not voted yet will get out and vote tomorrow. The union has endorsed Zora Mamdani, and we've done a huge amount of work on that behalf. We feel he will be the most pro-labor and pro-civil rights of any candidate.
Nancy, I think we lost you. Nancy, you're going in and out. We did
He
find.
will do a change in our city. Inspiration, change.
Okay, Nancy,
Excuse
for
me?
some reason you're going in and out, so let me try.
Oh.
Eileen, we'll come back to you. Eileen.
I'm sorry.
Eileen, do you want to continue with the pitch from Nancy?
Yes. Okay. Folks, again, tomorrow's election day, both the PSC and Zoran Mandani directly, if you wish to call people on the phone or do anything tomorrow, as well as vote yourself. So I'm putting both of those connections into the chat. The Get Out the Vote, the first one is from Zoran's campaign, and basically they're looking to make sure that people have a plan to vote and actually do it, because you can always lose a few folks at the last minute. And I'm sure all of you know, I happily was away for a few days of the last week, but before I left, all I saw was incredibly Islamophobic messages paid for by the Fix the City, again, the billionaire. So it really is us, the 99% against the 1%. We should not mistake that that's the stakes of this election. And I will post the other thing, which includes, again, remember that the PSC also has a lot at stake in the New York City Council elections. So I can post the connections to the PSC website so you can see not only whom we endorse for the citywide audiences or offices, but also the council seats, because again, a progressive council is what helped us restore much CUNY funding that Adams always took away. And we have to remember that Cuomo was never, never, never a friend to either New York City or CUNY, and needs to be stopped. Thanks.
Okay, Debbie's now with us. Hi, Debbie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Sorry, I did the old Joan Greenbaum trick of logging out and logging back in again.
Okay, that works.
So I will try to be prompt. First, for retirees on Medicare, you are not affected by the new health plan. Those of you on Medicare are not affected. However, you do have the opportunity during the month of November to change plans if you want to. There is an open enrollment period for retirees as well as for actives. So that's point one. Point two, those of you who pay IRMA, in other words, they have an IRMA deduction from your Social Security check, should have gotten the IRMA reimbursements in the last 2 weeks of October. For those on TRS, you get it into your checking, the account that your pension goes into. For those of you on TIAA, you should have gotten a check. If you don't know what this is about, there is information on the retiree chapter page that can link you, right, Bonnie, that can link you to what's going on, what IRMA is, which is really, if you have income over approximately $100,000, you are in a given year, not the following year, but the year after, you pay an increased Part B deductible called IRMA. But the point being that if you filed for a reimbursement, which you have to do every year because your tax returns are different every year. Thank you, Bonnie, she's posted it in chat. Your tax returns are different every year, so you have to apply every year. If you applied and did not get a check, you should contact the Office of Labor Relations about that, and the chapter, or I can send you an email address on that. That's probably on the website also. Two, everybody on Medicare, pay attention to your mail. At the end of November, you will get a letter from the Social Security Administration, which will tell you what your benefits will be for 2026, what the Medicare Part B deduction, everybody pays the same basic Part B deduction, will be for 2026, which is $206.50 a month. So that's taken off your Social Security benefits. And for CUNY retirees, that is reimbursed during the April of the year so in other words, the 2025 Part B reimbursement will be reimbursed in April. It will also tell you what your IRMA charge is if you have one. And that is then, as I said, reimbursed in the October of the year following. You have to pay your taxes, so they have a record of what your taxes. Anyway, the point being, keep that letter, put it in a file, so because if you're charged for IRMA, you have to submit that letter as documentation, as well as your 1099 from the Social Security Administration. Part B is going up almost 11.5%, whereas the Social Security benefits are only going up about 2.8%. Why is that? Because healthcare prices are accelerating fast, particularly hospital prices. And that's, what PSC continues to talk about, the need to build in controls on hospital prices. During the Trump administration, Medicare for All doesn't have much of a life, but we can begin the fight on hospital price controls, and the union keeps working on that. Is that it? Nothing will happen vis-a-vis Medicare Advantage. That's all dead in the water for now. So most of us are on senior care. Senior care will continue. Now, for retirees under 65, so those not on Medicare, you are going to be affected by the new health plan if you are currently, or if your spouses are under 65, if you are currently in GHI, Anthem, CBP, which most people are. That plan will not exist after December 31st, 2025. I'm going to give you a brief summary, because there are a lot of details to this, and they're to the extent that we can discern them and report them, they're all on the PSC website, what's happening to our healthcare. And I urge you, if you're an under 65 retiree, to go there and be sure you know what's going on. Anyone on GHI now will be automatically moved to what's called NYCEPPO. New York City employees PPO plan. Our best collective estimate of what this plan means is that for 2026, there will not be very much change for those people who were on GHI. What is troubling is that for the future years, if this is a New York City designed plan, and the city can change things during the course of the 5-year plan. There's a 5-year plan in place, no premiums, just like GHI, but the city can change the plan. It's a self-insured plan, which means the city controls it and these insurance companies just administer. They pay the claims, they keep track of who's available and who's not. People have already begun complaining that there's not enough information. Putting in a new health plan is always tricky. And the providers often don't know that there's a new plan coming into place. So there are information sessions scheduled by Emblem Health. And if you look at this week in the PSC, there's a list of the schedule of information sessions. As I said, there's a lot of information on what's happening to our healthcare FAQs on the PSC website. Also on that website is an email address at the union where you can write with questions. I would also encourage you, before they have hired someone to answer people's questions, but before you bombard the union, use the customer service phone number or email address posted by the plan, because they've got to know that people have lots of questions and aren't satisfied with what the information they're getting. So I would urge you, if you have questions, go to the plan first, and then, if your question still isn't answered, email the union. The open enrollment period during November is available to active employees and to pre-65 retirees. If you're currently in GHI, you will automatically be moved to the new plan. Prescription drug coverage remains the same, and it's through the welfare fund. Your vision, your hearing, your other benefits through the welfare fund all remain the same. If you think you don't want to go to the new plan, you can go on the Office of Labor, the Employee Benefits Program website, and there are links in the FAQs on the PSC website. You can go there are links that will allow you to go into the different plans that are available, look at what they offer, and some of them have costs over and above what the premiums that the city pays. So you should just be aware of that. If you want to change, you have to spend some time sort of thinking through what works and what does not work for you. And that's it.
Okay, Debbie, and maybe we have one hand. Do you have time to answer the?
Sure.
Gloria, can you hear us? Can you unmute yourself? Gloria Palace has.
I'm here trying. Hi, Debbie. Hi, everyone. I heard that there was a lawsuit filed last week about the new plan. I'm under 65. I heard PSC is a part of it, and not true. And I keep getting texts from someone, but they're not saying what organization it is that they're filing. Do you know who these people are that filed the lawsuit then? I'd like to know how they got my information then if PSC is not doing this.
I don't know the answer to how they got your information.
Mm-hmm.
There's an organization called Hands Off Our Healthcare.
Yes, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is a lawsuit filed by a bunch of individuals and by that organization, alleging, just to cut to the chase, alleging that the administrative code does not permit the city to set up a self-insured fund.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read only the administrative code, that is true. There is language in state law that allows the municipality to override that as regards self-insurance, maybe. I'm not a lawyer.
Okay.
It's a complicated business. Let me take a step back. I'm sure many of you think, well, we filed a lawsuit, the retirees, the municipal retirees filed a lawsuit and got a temporary restraining order against implementing the plan. That order remained in effect for several years, which, ultimately ended up with the highest court in the state saying the city was right after several layers of courts said no, they weren't right. But at that point, Mayor Adams was in the middle of an election and didn't see much of a point in pursuing Medicare Advantage given the large opposition to it that had arisen. So presumably what's going on is lawyers are looking at existing law and trying to find a loophole that can be the basis of a lawsuit wherein they seek a temporary restraining order against implementing the plan and then can build up more opposition to it. In my view, and this is not the union's view necessarily, it's my personal view. I've read a lot of the documents. I've read some of the court documents. I don't know that this lawsuit will hold up, but I'm not sure. I think the difficulty is that there is a long range difficulty to this new plan, which is the fact that it can be changed. And how is the city going to save all the money it claims it wants to save by offering a plan that's basically what exists now? There are savings in it becoming more efficient. It will be more efficient. People will only have one ID card. There will be much more integration of outpatient and inpatient care. There are reasons to think the city will save money, but not the big bucks they are looking for. So my real concern is once we get past 2026, how is the plan going to change, and will participants in the plan end up having to pay more either in deductibles or in copays? They won't be charged a premium. The one solid point of the plan and the contract with the insurance companies who are administering the plan is that the city won't charge participants a premium for the 5 years of the contract. So that's a roundabout answer, Gloria, to your question.
Okay, thank you very much. I will be 65 in June, so I'll be on this plan for 5 months. I think I'll be okay, but I'm sorry for my former colleagues because, I've had this insurance for 38 years and it's been very good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gloria. I don't see any other hands, and it's 3:02. There was a question.
There are Eileen Moran has her hand up.
Oh, I don't see. Go ahead, Eileen.
I just wanted to say that nowhere near the $1 billion that needs to be saved in healthcare, but there is self-insuring does save the city a substantial amount of money because there is a New York State tax that it will save. And I don't off the top of my head remember what that number was, but I recently received it from Barbara Caress.
Right. It's not that big a number. I mean, they're going to save
nowhere
some
near the
money.
billion.
There's going to save several tens of millions, but not the big bucks that
Right.
they charge
Right.
out.
Okay, we have Nancy, and I think we'll make Nancy the last word here. Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
But what Debbie described as her concern that we haven't been able to see the entire package is exactly why the union abstained on voting for the CLC proposal. And that was decided at the delegate assembly. There were parts of the proposal that were redacted and that
Parts
even
of the contract.
I'm sorry, the contract, thank you. The contract were redacted. So even all the union presidents were not allowed to see the entire document. So that's why people voted to abstain as a kind of protest vote, even though we knew it wouldn't have an impact on the ultimate outcome. And just want to report on a personal meeting I had with Zora Mamdani that the union had arranged. where I asked him directly, what is your position on Medicare Advantage? And because there's been a lot of rumor about, oh, he's going to support Medicare Advantage. He was emphatic in saying, I am opposed to Medicare Advantage. I am for Medicare for all. I am for keeping publicly financed Medicare for city retirees. And you could see the upset on his face that people are passing these rumors on about him. I know there's been a big push to support, I think it's Whalen, I'm not sure the guy's name, that has been, advancing the lawsuits for the effort to keep Medicare as we have it. But Zohran Mamdani is completely in support of Medicare and opposed to Medicare Advantage. So if you hear those rumors, please inform people.
And spread the word by tomorrow. And that's that's a hopeful note to end on, I think. Thank you to all for your patience, the fact that I sort of stepped in here. And have a good day and vote. Please vote. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.